Hello there. The truth is, I've shied away from this subject in the past, but after the events of the last couple of days, I feel obliged to say plenty on the matter. Now, whatever you think of Tommy Robinson, whether you agree or disagree with his opinions and views, or whether you're just indifferent to him, we all need to pay heed to the way that he has been treated by the media, by the government, and by our law over the past couple of years. Now, we all know about his past. We know that he was a member as a youngster of the BNP till he decided it wasn't for him. We know that after his town of Luton got overrun by radical Muslims who were spitting on and abusing homecoming British soldiers disgracefully, he decided to set up the EDL. He then left the EDL when it got hijacked by far right extremists and proper racists, and he became a independent reporter. Now we also know that in his past that he's got a conviction for some form of mortgage fraud to do with a relative's property, and we also know that he's had a few skirmishes in the past too. But let's be honest, we all have a past. There are thousands and thousands of men in the UK today who are masquerading as tolerant, liberal, modern men who've all got a past, many of whom have a past that involves taking drugs and being involved in violence and probably some kind of fraudulent activity, and no doubt a past of some kind of racial undertones, and a past of thinking they weren't happy with how their country, Great Britain, was going. And the thing is, a lot of these men are probably the same very ones who today are pointing a finger at Tommy Robinson. Now, the mainstream media and the government are using Tommy's past, obviously, uh, as a stick with which to beat him with. But let's forget about the distant past and let's just concentrate on the last few years. Um, because although I don't know Tommy Robinson, I've never spoken to him, I've never been to a rally, and I can't say I'm a Tommy Robinson supporter because of them facts, but I have been watching and listening to what he's been saying and doing over the past few years. Now, Tommy Robinson's biggest problem is this: he's living in a country where speaking the truth about certain cultures and certain religions and certain peoples and certain events is equated to hate speech. So, what has Tommy been doing and saying and standing up for over the past few years? Well, to me, Tommy Robinson speaks the truth. He doesn't lie, he speaks the truth and he backs it up with facts. But the media and the government don't want to hear these facts. They want to suppress and silence anybody, with the gumption to state them. So, from what I can gather, Tommy has dedicated the last few years of his life to exposing the truth, yeah, to fighting for free speech and to exposing the media's lies. Now, he hasn't done it any better than he did with his Panodrama documentary, in which he has caught on camera the producer of Panorama basically being a bigot, making bigoted remarks and telling lies and trying to coerce a young woman into telling lies and giving false accusations against Tommy. Now, if Panorama had made that documentary about, let's say, a high profile celebrity or a sports star or a politician, that person's life and career would be in tatters. And yet, after Tommy's exposing of Panorama, nothing has happened. Nothing. It just shows you the double standards at play. Now, Tommy's also dedicated himself to exposing the Muslim grooming gangs operating all around the UK. Now, when I say exposing them, I don't mean he's finding them and bringing them to justice. I mean he's highlighting the fact that they're there and operating to people who otherwise would never know this was the case. So what's his reward for doing this? Well, his reward was to be arrested, tried, convicted, and locked up one mad day, all within 8 hours. And in the recent history of Britain, that is unheard of, for somebody to be arrested, tried, convicted, locked up, doors slammed shut within 8 hours. It shows the desperation of the powers that be to lock Tommy's views and opinions and lock Tommy's exposed truths away from the people just as soon as they can. Now, Tommy's also dedicated himself to exposing the left and to exposing ragtag leftist groups such as Antifa and Hope Not Hate, who have simply been set up by the left to silence and to slander anybody saying anything that disagrees with the leftist agenda. But whilst doing this, he continues to distance himself from the far-right radicals. Now, Tommy has dedicated himself to exposing the hypocrisy within the mainstream media, within the government, and within the left. Okay? And he's also dedicated himself lately to fighting for Brexit. Now, Brexit, as we know, is the will of the majority of the British people. So Tommy, rightfully so, is standing up for that. He's also standing up against radical Islam. He's standing up against the rise of Sharia law, which has got no place in the UK, but which is evidently seeping its way in here. He's also been highlighting the radicalisation of young Muslims in UK mosques. Now, I buy a newspaper. I buy a national newspaper every day. I read and buy a national newspaper every day. But if it wasn't for the likes of Tommy and others on the internet making me aware of these issues, making me aware of the grooming gangs, making me aware of the radicalisation of young Muslims, okay, making me aware of the lies and the hypocrisy of the mainstream media, I would never know about these things. I would never know about all these things if they weren't exposed by people like Tommy and his ilk on the internet. So for all this, what does Tommy get? He gets persecuted. He gets persecuted like nobody I can remember in my living memory in the UK. And he gets slandered. He gets slandered terribly by the mainstream media. Now, one way in which they just try to ridicule Tommy is a lot of people in the media insist on still calling him by his birth name, Stephen Yaxley Lennon. Now, that wouldn't be an issue to me if it wasn't for the fact that the very same people, when some twisted bloke decides he wants to identify as a 15-year-old girl called Sally, these people insist that we refer to Sally as Sally. We refer to him as her. And to do otherwise is to be a hate crime against the LGBTQ society. Okay? So they insist that we refer to this person how they want to be referred to, how they want to be identified to, and yet they won't identify Tommy Robinson how he wants to be identified as, which is Tommy Robinson. The double standards and the hypocrisy is shocking. Now, he's also been slandered in Parliament. Our MPs, within the confines and the safety of the House of Common Walls, have slandered him as a criminal, as a thug, as a loathsome individual. And yet, you've got our MPs calling him a criminal. That's the MPs, many and many of whom have been stealing our money over the years by way of exaggerated expense claims, let's say. Again, hypocrisy at the highest level. Now, the other thing the politicians have been doing lately is they've been pressurising people like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to remove him from their sites, okay? Because they simply do not want his truthful exposés, his truthful words to be viewed by the people. And they've got the law, that's a good one, the law. They've got the law in the UK trying to frame him, trying to send him down on trumped up charges. Just like I mentioned before, where he was locked up within 8 hours for filming paedophiles, Muslim paedophiles, outside court. He wasn't giving people any information that wasn't already in the public domain. Okay? He wasn't prejudicing a trial because these people had already been convicted. He was simply letting people know what the mainstream media and the government were desperately trying to hide from us. So all this points to one big conspiracy to silence him. Okay. Now, I think Tommy realised a while back that when it came to the mainstream media and the government, he was banging his head against a brick wall in his attempt to expose the truth as an independent journalist, stroke activist. So he's trying a new route out, and he's trying to get into politics, and to do so he's trying to become an MEP. So he started up a campaign lately in the Northwest, but he's still being ridiculed by the mainstream media. But even worse than that, he's being abused, he's being slandered, and he's being assaulted on the streets of Britain by some of the general public. Now, while the police stand by and are doing nothing to apprehend the perpetrators. Okay, so we've got an MP down in London, Anna Soubry, who gets called a Nazi on her way to the House of Commons, a term which is quite fitting for her anyway, but she gets called a Nazi. The perpetrator has been arrested and locked up for a month. Okay, we've got a Scottish MP who is so fucking insignificant I can't even remember his name, but hiding behind the walls of the House of Commons and egged on by the Speaker of the House, has been slandering Tommy Robinson as loathsome, as a criminal, as a thug, as a convicted racist, etc. And when Tommy takes the time out to go and calmly approach the guy to ask him why he said these things, the guy hides under a fucking desk in a library, and outside the library, four police officers are protecting the door. Okay, so our police can walk alongside MPs through the busy streets of London to work. They can protect a Scottish MP from answering questions from a member of the public who he is fucking beholden to. Yet, a wannabe MEP like Tommy Robinson can be abused and assaulted on the streets while the police stand by, sniggering behind their fucking hands. It's shocking. It's absolutely disgraceful. But I'm sure that Tommy is well aware that because of the mainstream media and the government agenda, okay, he's never going to get any protection, okay? But what must really frustrate Tommy is to be abused, to be assaulted by the general public out on the streets, to be assaulted by indoctrinated fucking fools that he is trying to stand up for. Do these people not realise that they are the very people whose right to free speech are what Tommy Robinson is out there standing up for? You'd think they would be grateful that there is still one man left in the UK with a pair of balls to stand up for what he believes in and to stand up for their rights and to stand up for their free speech. The thing is, you can believe what you want, okay? You can believe the ridiculous accusations about Tommy Robinson. You can believe that he's a paid shill. You can believe that he's being backed by the Jews, okay? You can believe that he's just a publicity seeker, okay? But you cannot deny that this man is out there on the street putting his own safety, the safety of his family, at risk in order to stand up for what he believes in, okay? The man has got the scars to prove it. He's got the beatings to prove this, yeah? He is subject to several death threats. He's been subject to numerous Osman warnings from the police, and yet he still goes out there day after day to speak up against what's wrong in the UK and to stand up for what he believes in. Okay? The man is not a Nazi. He is not a fascist. He is in fact the opposite of a fascist. It is fascists that are trying to suppress him. It is fascists that are trying to silence him. And the fact that they are doing so by calling him a fascist, by labelling him a fascist, is the biggest fucking hypocrisy of all. Now be warned, you indoctrinated sheep, that when men like Tommy Robinson and the few men left in the UK with the balls to speak out, when they are eventually suppressed and eventually silenced, the UK is fucked, and the UK will be laid bare and laid open to be taken over by the very people that the likes of Tommy Robinson are trying to fight against, the very people that they are trying to suppress. If this happens, the UK is no longer. Right, if Tommy ever manages to set eyes on this video, I would just like to pass on my thanks and to pass on my best wishes for your family, Tommy. And above all else, keep your family safe, because they're going to be appreciating you a hell of a lot more than these fucking indoctrinated fools who are abusing you on our streets. That's it. Anyway, feel free to like and share this video all around, and feel free to subscribe. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Speak soon.